The Pennsylvania area surrounding Kecksburg has become known as a hotbed of strange occurrences, particularly UFOs and Bigfoot. The evening of May 18, 1975, around 10 p.m., Philip Arlotta and his unnamed wife had just gotten into their car and were preparing to go home after visiting their relatives in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Distractedly reaching down to start the car's engine, Mrs. Arlotta suddenly noticed a strange object moving in the sky above them. It was described as the size of a melon and egg-shaped, bright yellow on the bottom but darker on the top. And the darker part of the body seemed to have 6 square windows, which a red light shone from. The object traveled across the sky from the east to the west. Confused, she alerted her husband, who advised her to turn on the engine to see if they could hear anything. However, no sound was heard, and after about a minute of silent observation, they called their relatives out so they could see the strange object. 5 people gathered around and all looked at the aerial anomaly that seemed to be moving towards them at less than 1,000 feet in the air. Just as it got closer and closer to the stunned witnesses, it made a sharp turn and sped to the left. As the height increased, its color changed from yellow to orange. Not wanting to let this strange wonder escape them so easily, the witnesses got into the car to follow it. They followed it on the back road and noticed that it was apparently smaller than before. Eventually, they lost sight of it, but they said they watched it for about 4 minutes. The next evening, an unnamed lone driver was on his way back to his house in Jeannette, Pennsylvania. He saw something strange to his left. He stopped the car and backed up to get a closer look. At first, he thought it was a German Shepherd. It was only a few hundred meters away from him, and it seemed to be running. Looking at it, however, he decided that its movements were more like a monkey than a dog. After a few seconds, the creature suddenly got up and started running like a man into the forest. The witnesses described him as having thick black hair and 7 to 8 feet tall. Said witness used to be a staunch skeptic of all things Bigfoot. Apparently, he had no idea about the previous UFO activity and the possible otherworldly existence of the creature in question. This story is from Real Monsters, Gruesome Critters, and Beasts from the Dark Side by Brad Steger. Assumably a work of fiction to me personally, but you can have your own opinion. A video from India that has created quite a stir on the internet. Several viewers speculated that the footage shows an alien or some other mysterious entity. Theories that only gained traction after the video was picked up by several news outlets and even international media. UK-based news website described the character as a strange humanoid, while celebrities in India shared the video on Instagram saying it was creepy. The clip has been widely circulated on social media and messaging platforms such as WhatsApp. Some viewers even managed to spot a UFO in the clip and sent it to NASA. While the sight of a slender figure walking alone down a dark path is definitely a strange sight, the truth is that there is nothing supernatural or otherworldly about the video. The men who filmed the video were interviewed on a local news channel, and they confirmed that the figure is in fact a woman walking naked at night. One of the men, Deepak, said that he and his friend were driving on the road at night when they noticed a strange woman walking naked. Though they were initially afraid of what they saw and continued on their way, they returned after a few minutes to film the woman. It was a woman walking on the road with no clothes on. We got scared when we first saw the woman and stopped at a shop near the highway. When a few others reached the spot, we asked them if they too saw the woman. She was not a witch. she was a woman, and this was also confirmed by the passerbys. That's an abrupt ending. I want more information on that. One night in October 1973, young Folkville Police Chief Jeff Greenhall was hoping for a quiet evening at home after a long day of work. Instead, he would receive a call that would change his life forever. An anonymous call from a frantic caller about a UFO in a field just outside of town. Jeff rarely gives interviews about that night, although thankfully he has told his story. I was hired in January 1973, and this all happened on October 17th, 1973, he said. He would resign in the following weeks. His first thought was that he was simply dealing with an idiot. After that, everything was weird, he explained. It's not real. It's not actually like that, but it happened to me. Why me? He was looking at a figure just over 6 feet tall, dressed in reflective gear. My first thought might be tinfoil, but there were no pieces left on the ground after this. I don't know what to believe at that point. It looked like his head and neck were somehow put together. He was real bright and smooth as glass. Different angles give different light, according to Greenhall. The being's movements were not human-like. Every time I think about it, when I was a kid, I watched the movie Lost in Space. The robot in the movie reminded me of that to a certain extent. Greenhall grabbed his Polaroid camera and took 4 pictures of everything in front of him. I said something like, "Hello, stranger," and there's no response. He explained, "I didn't push my luck." At that moment, I turned on the patrol car's blue lights and saw how reflective the material really was. Then when I looked back, he was walking away from me, so I decided to chase him and, if necessary, run him over. That didn't happen either. He placed the pictures on the dashboard of the patrol car. When he looked back, the figure was moving. "It doesn't move like you or I would move," he says. "Like his legs have springs or something. That strange creature will run away at the speed beyond human capabilities." Greenhall pursued the figure in his patrol car, and although he reached speeds of 35 miles per hour, it was not fast enough to catch the figure. He eventually lost sight of it after crashing his patrol car. He was left to wonder what had just happened to him. He kept the 4 photos in a safe place for several years after the encounter, but he claims that nearly 10 years later, someone broke into his house and stole all 4 photos. He filed a police report in 1983 about the break-in. Also missing were weapons of his. I took them out and looked at them regularly during the 10 years I had them. I thought, this is strange. The only 3 things I had with me that night were the weapons and the photos. All 3 are missing. I withdrew from the public eye for many years, he said. People made his life difficult after he recounted his experience that night. The people who were supposed to be my friends. The only thing I realized was that I couldn't really trust anyone. I withdrew and ran, trying to get away from it. It turned out I became someone I never thought I would become because of what happened. It made me tough, but it also made me strong. I almost lost my mind, but my wife and God kept me from losing my mind. That's the only thing that keeps me going. I still believe in life after passing, and there was a time when I didn't believe there was other life in the universe, but that has really changed. He never sought to profit financially from his encounter. Either way, clinging to stories about that strange autumn evening made his life extremely difficult and caused him to be isolated and ridiculed by many. According to legend, and a historic Texas landmark. In the early morning of April 17th, 1897, something strange happened in the small town of Aurora, about 30 miles northwest of Fort Worth. A cigar-shaped aircraft was seen falling from the sky when it crashes into a windmill and explodes. It is said that the aircraft is not of this world. The pilot, who was from Mars, they said at the time, would be buried in the nearby Aurora Cemetery. The town recently held a convention to commemorate the UFO crash. People have different opinions about what really happened 120 years ago. Resident Tony Wheeler first heard of the crash when she was a child growing up in Aurora. An elderly neighbor often sat on his porch and told stories. Then I started talking to my grandfather about it, and he would snicker about it, and he said that's hogwash. But my uncles would discuss it. Especially my Uncle Marvin, she said. He likes to tell tales, all kinds of stories, and Ned's stories is one of them. Many people in Aurora refer to the alien as Ned. This is the alien pilot said to be buried in the city. Wheeler came up with the name and it stuck. The Wheeler family has lived in Aurora for generations. She has served as Aurora City Administrator for more than a decade. She led bus trips to the crash site and Old Town Cemetery. It was part of the Aurora Alien Encounters Conference that she helped organize. Researchers have been studying the story for years, testing water from the well where the wreckage is believed to be, taking metal from trees at the crash site to prove something exploded, and using radars to see if there really is an alien grave site. In the 1970s, attempts were made to exhume the remains. You can't exhume a grave unless you notify relatives, so the Cemetery Association obtained a court order in 1972 to prevent the exhumation of the remains. This is not the only UFO sighting in Texas in the spring of 1897. The Dallas Morning News, taking it literally that this was indeed an extraterrestrial event. An extraterrestrial event linked to Ned's ship to a series of UFO sightings around the country. Papers were found on the body of the alien, apparently record his travels, were written in unknown and indecipherable hieroglyphs. The ship was too damaged to make any conclusions about its structure or engines. It was crafted from an unknown metal that looked a bit like a crashed man-made craft. Others call it a hoax. Some at the time saw this as a sign that Judgment Day was approaching. These days in Aurora, people are even more tense about whether the town should embrace the alien story. There are people on our city council, people on other committees across the city who have threatened to resign if we participate in the project. It is that serious. The conference is just one statue in the works depicting a broken windmill and the flying saucer that Ned dropped. That Ned crashed. A resident says, "I live not far from there, and every day there are people lining up at the cemetery to look around. And from a business and marketing perspective, that was an asset that we weren't capitalizing on. More than just a business opportunity, however, she sees cherishing the city's early history as a way to preserve its unique identity as it enveloped in other outer suburbs in Fort Worth. Without its story, our legacy would disappear and Aurora would become just another part of the area." The turnout of the convention was pleasing for many. The room was full. Conference organizers say that they want it to become an annual tradition. Like many participants, Richard Wall said he had his own UFO encounter. A few years ago, he said he saw glowing orbs in the night sky flying away with sonic booms. As for the crash of 1897, he is skeptical. I'm sure someone saw something, is trying to make sense of the story behind what they saw, he said. His wife, Dolly, shook her head at her husband's disbelief. I believe it, I said. I really do. I believe it, she said. I really do, because there are other beings out there. We're not the only ones here. Even if an alien didn't land in Aurora in 1897, doesn't mean aliens aren't out there somewhere. Several videos have surfaced online claiming UFOs were hovering over the Islamic shrine known as the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem after midnight on January 28th in 2011. The videos have sparked a heated debate about whether we finally have found evidence of UFOs. Benjamin Radford, veteran researcher of many UFO photos and videos, claims that these images are highly questionable and all signs point to a hoax. No one knows who originally took the videos. He argues that anonymous reports are usually a red flag that something is wrong. There are very few legitimate reasons for not wanting to identify a true witness. For example, fear of retaliation from gang members or the mafia. Although it seems unlikely that aliens threatened anyone to keep quiet, he questions if you were one of the first people in the world to capture the most amazing UFO footage of the last decade. Why would you post it anonymously on YouTube instead of submitting it for professional analysis or making money by selling it to the news? In fact, it is speculated that most or all of the videos were indeed posted by one person, guaranteeing it a hoax. It's likely that at least one of the videographers or someone working with them would have come forward in the past 10 days to sell their story to a newspaper or tabloid. Suspicious. Also, no one other than the videographers reported seeing the lights. The Dome of the Rock is one of the world's most famous and important religious sites. And Jerusalem usually has more than 1 million people in the city, many of them religious tourists near the Temple Mount. There must have been thousands of people in the area at the time, but no one else reported seeing or filming a bright light. Very strange, although a woman is heard in the video saying that the mysterious light was so bright you almost couldn't look at it. The object does not appear to be reflecting light onto the gilded dome below. This is unusual and strongly suggests that the UFO light was digitally added to the scene. Also note that general lighting would be one of the easiest UFOs to fake. You wouldn't have to worry about drawing or animating the windows or wings, the spaceship, or shadows on the ship itself. Then there is the strangely small size of the UFO, which can be approximated by comparing it to the size of the dome it hovers over. It appears to be 15 feet at most, which seems awfully small for a spacecraft that supposedly traveled across the universe. The Jerusalem UFO has now been conclusively proven to be a hoax. The effects of the video editing software are clearly visible. The Jerusalem UFO videos have caused much controversy since their release, with many believers staunchly defending the videos as real.